China, they'll take a look around to Selma, Alabama. But you can live here for 4 days in space, but when you return, it's the same old place. The drum and the drums, the pride and disgrace. That you can bury your dead, but don't leave a trace. Hate your next door neighbor, but don't forget to say grace.
Well, welcome everybody to Woodstock. Are you excited? I'm excited. Hey, Evan. Yeah. Here we go.
Rock band. Who wants to play a song?
I do, but first we have a little sound bite from the actual Woodstock event itself.
Let's go to the information booth, man. It's a vote, please. All right. Please, people in that crane area, please move out. Please don't sit near it, because when the crane swings, you're going to get conked on the head and it's really going to hurt.
This is one thing that I was going to wait a while before we talked about. But maybe we'll talk about it now so you can think about it, because we all have to make some kind of plans for ourselves. It's a free concert from now on. That doesn't mean that anything goes. What that means is we're going to put the music up here for free. Now, let's face the situation. We've had thousands and thousands of people come here today. Many, many more than we knew or even dreamt or thought would be possible. We're going to need each other to help each other to work this out, because we're taxing the systems that we have set up. We're going to be bringing the food in. But the one major thing you have to remember tonight, when you go back up into the woods to go to sleep, or if you stay here, is that the man next to you is your brother. And you damn well better treat each other that way, because if they don't, then we blow the whole thing. But we've got it right there.
You heard that?
15th, 1969, 450,000 people from all over the United States converged on Max Yazer's farm in Bethel, New York. Little did these young people know that this event, which was billed as the Woodstock Music and Art Fair and Aquarian Exposition, was destined to make music history and would become to symbolize the energy and idealism of an entire generation. This three-day music festival that has come to be called simply Woodstock marked a coming of age, the maturing of a musical style that had been growing in popularity since the 1950s, rock and roll. The music that had grown out of the raw energy and emotion of the black blues and the down-home, working-class mentality of funk, folk, and country music had gone high-power electric and had been seized by a restless, rebellious, and high-spirited generation of the baby boomers.
Never before had so many top-rated musical acts assembled to share one stage. Some were well-established traditional performers: Joan Baez, Ravi Shankar, Tim Hardin, Sly and the Family Stone. And then there were new, up-and-coming artists destined for greatness: the Grateful Dead, Santana, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Many of these groups were spawned by the psychedelic scene that had blossomed in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco.
But the cultural, social, and political events that surrounded these 3 days of peace and music transcended this one event. The late 60s were a time of experimentation and self-expression. Hallucinogenic drug use, especially marijuana, was on the rise. Dr. Timothy Leary from Harvard University had many young people convinced that LSD would free their minds. The development of hassle-free birth control pills liberated their sexual desires. And most important were the sheer numbers. Twice as numerous as their parents, teenage Americans formed a distinctive, self-conscious culture which exerted tremendous political and economic power. As a result, this generation of young people began to believe that they would change the world. Not everyone agreed on exactly what the change should look like, but there is wide agreement among this generation that the establishment, where mom dutifully stays home while dad in his business suit keeps the military-industrial complex in full swing, was bad. Some fought to change the status quo, while others choose to escape or drop out through the purple haze of drug use, communal living, and simply by looking and acting as differently from their parents as they possibly could.
Generation as a power to be reckoned with in society. Let's take a step back in time. Neither the idea that passion, like-minded people could change the world, nor that rock music itself could broadcast this philosophy was invented out of nothing in the late 60s. In fact, one of the most direct influences in this generation was the civil rights movement of the early 60s. With much thanks to Martin Luther King Jr. and his followers, the entire world watched the blacks in America respond to hundreds of years of oppression with peaceful, organized, and effective protests. Who would forget the famous March on Washington in August of 1963, where 250,000 demonstrators demanded jobs, civil rights, and racial justice? And who would forget the clarion call of King's speech?
Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring when it happens. When we allow freedom ring,
Albert Johnson, Billie Holiday, Rudy Ledbetter, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, James Brown. The list goes on and on. One of the most influential of all was a young man named McKinley Morganfield. Do you know who that is? Muddy Waters, who traveled from the Louisiana Delta north to Chicago with an electric guitar, a powerful deep voice, and a burning passion for his music to be heard. While his music and lyrics were usually very personal in nature, they always pushed the boundaries for everyone, coining the phrase, like a rolling stone. Muddy Waters asserted that he would do his own thing, his own way, and not be stopped by anyone.
Don't care how long you stay.
Another source of inspiration for activists in the 60s was the labor movement of the early 29th century in America. By the mid-60s, workers had benefited greatly from the struggles of the miners, farmers, constructors, and factory workers. and all sorts of labor organizations, things we take granted for today. Safety laws, minimum working wage, the 40-hour work week, all the stems from the fierce struggle between laborers and management. The Swedish immigrant named Joe Hill was a symbol of the struggle.
Joe Hill came to the U.S. at the age of 10 and worked at dozens of odd jobs in fields, mines, and docks. More importantly, he came to know the poor people who toiled in dangerous mining and agriculture jobs for low pay. Joe Hill became an outspoken member of the radical labor group, Industrial Workers of the World. His most important contributions to the labor movement were his simple folk songs, which helped inform and inspire his fellow workers across the country. He set the passion of idealism and rebellion to music. Joe Hill was convicted and executed for murder in 1915 in a questionable case in Utah, which served to immortalize him in the eyes of labor activists throughout the country. Many musical artists in the 20th century who boldly spoke out for the common person, Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan, John Lennon, viewed Joe Hill as a forefather to their art. Recognition of that legacy came at Woodstock through the voice of Joan Baez. Rather than sing about the controversial war in Vietnam, which seemed to have stolen everyone's attention, she offered a song about an individual, his spirit and his determination to speak out. The song, written by poet Alfred Hayes, was "I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill."
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you or me. Since I was Joe, you're 10 years dead.
Joan Baez had played an active role in many organizations' fights against oppression. Women also began to consider the oppression and discrimination they themselves faced. From the labor and civil rights movements, they had learned techniques of direct action, political pressure, and use of media, and they began to use these techniques to gain more equal role in American life.
However, feminism was not born in the 60s. The term feminism was used in 1895 to describe the philosophy of political, economic, and social equality for women. Women have been working since the 1800s for the right to vote and other legal rights such as child custody rights, property rights, rights up to their income, and legal protection from physical abuse. By the beginning of the 1960s, almost half of all women had jobs, but the average woman was paid 63 cents, 63 cents for every dollar a man made. By 1973, the average for women's pay had dropped to 59 cents. Inequity came about in spite of increased numbers of women going to college. Inequalities in pay combined with discrimination in hiring and in promoting created a growing sense of frustration among women.
The civil rights movement had provided women with a powerful legal tool to begin challenging the discrimination they faced. Ironically, in an effort to kill the Civil Rights Act of 1964, opponents added an amendment to outlaw discrimination on the basis of gender, thinking it would make the legislation look ridiculous. To the surprise of civil rights opponents, both the bill and the amendment were passed.
Spurred by Betty Friedan's 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique, women also began to meet with other women to explore their own lives and support each other as they challenged the status quo in their homes, on the job, and in society, seeking more respect and equal treatment. In 1966, 28 women, including Betty Friedan, created the NOW, or the National Organization of Women, to fight for their goal of achieving equality for women. The NOW took on everything from fair pay and equal job opportunities to the media and the false images of women presented. The NOW's membership has grown from its original 28 members to over 280,000 members today. In 1972, journalist Gloria Steinem and others founded Miss Magazine. It was devoted to feminist issues and provided women with an alternate viewpoint from traditional women's magazines like Good Housekeeping. Miss Magazine and the NOW, along with others in the women's movement, helped to bring about a significant shift in attitudes about women and their role in society. I'm done.
Like the women's movement, the environmental movement had roots in the progressive era of the late 1800s and early 1900s. Inspired by the writings of naturalist John Muir, Congress established Yellowstone as the nation's first national park in 1872. Yosemite National Park was established in California in 1890. President Teddy Roosevelt added more than 200 million acres to the federal park system, and New Deal programs like the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, put people back to work planting trees and doing other kinds of conservation work.
The modern environmental movement sprang from the work of marine biologist Rachel Carson. Published in 1962, her book, Silent Spring, led the attack against the use of chemical pesticides like DDT, which threatened the survival of birds and fish by poisoning the food chain. Rachel Carson's work reawakened the general public to the realization that people, plants, and animals are all part of the same ecosystem, and that what we did to the environment, we are doing to ourselves. Around the time of Woodstock, Joni Mitchell, a popular singer-songwriter, released the song Big Yellow Taxi, urging listeners to think hard about society's impact on the environment, or else They'll pave paradise and put up a parking lot.
In response, the federal government created the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970. Wisconsin's own governor and U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson created the first Earth Day in 1970 to serve as a yearly reminder of environmental conservation efforts. Like the women's movement, the efforts of many individuals and environmental organizations significantly changed attitudes and behaviors with regard to conservation and protection of the environment.
It should be noted that none of these movements, nor the counterculture of the late 60s, was a monolithic, single, unified effort. Like today, young people sought out many different ways to achieve their identity and self-expression. These included campaigning for young, idealistic leaders like John F. Kennedy, joining drug-free communes, and working for a variety of social causes through the church and community groups and the Peace Corps.
By the mid-1960s, U.S. foreign policy in Vietnam provided the catalyst that would unify the younger generation. On February 11, 1965, the first sustained bombing raids against the North Vietnamese by U.S. forces were ordered by President Lyndon Johnson. And on March 8, 1965, President Johnson sent the first U.S. combat troops to Vietnam.
We do not want an expanding struggle with consequences that no one can foresee, nor will we bluster or bully or flaunt our power. But we will not surrender, and we will not retreat. We intend to convince the communists that we cannot be defeated by force of arms or by superior power. I have asked the commanding general, General Westmoreland, what more he needs to meet this mounting aggression. He has told me
famous protest songs was Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind, with lines like, "How many times must the cannonballs fly before they are forever banned?" But possibly the song that most typifies the satirical bite of the anti-war movement was the song that Country Joe McDonald sang to kick off the Woodstock Music and Art Fair.
Well, come on.